Welcome. Today we're going to do something that's fun again. Now, a modern feature of a lot of vehicles are ambient lights in the car. Now, basically anything Ford comes out with has a lot of what they call mood lighting or ambient lighting in the car, where there's lights under the footwells, in the back, under the cup holders, that type of stuff. I really like that feature. I don't necessarily care that there's 50 lights or 50 different colors. But it is nice to have lights under the footwells and maybe under the back seats. So today what we're going to do is install some LED light strips underneath the footwells of the Xterra. I went with just a simple white strip. I bought 2 of them. We're going to do just the footwells today. And, it's going to be a pretty simple install. But really the most important thing to know here is that if you are wanting to add a multicolored light to underneath the dash, it is a different process than we're doing here. The basics could be the same, but there's some pretty critical differences that I can point out later in the video. So I want these lights to turn on whenever our map lights are on in the front of the car. So the easiest way to do that is literally tie them into the light bulbs themselves up in the dome light area, the map lights. So what we're going to do is actually just remove this, and we're going to tie in the wires right to the back of where the bulbs actually contact the electrical contacts. We're then going to run the wires over, down each side of the A-pillars, and then underneath to our lights. Sounds a little complicated. But to be honest, after looking over the wiring schematics, this is actually one of the easier ways of doing it. So you're going to need a few important tools. I'm actually going to use solder. You could possibly get away without using it, but I'm going to show you the way I'm going to do it, and then also point out some other ways you can do it without using some of the required tools or recommended tools. So let's get started. Now, to wire this up, the easiest way is to actually just remove it from the vehicle and worry about the wiring outside of the truck. So to remove these, it's actually very easy. Just put your fingers in front of the lights themselves, and it just literally pops right out with almost no effort at all. So pull that out, and in the back, you're just going to see a standard good old electrical connector that you see all over the truck. So you just want to push that down, and it pops right out. It's really that easy. Most of the work, as far as all the connections, can be done right on the workbench. So let's go. All right, so the light is out of the truck. Now, a few quick pointers on this. If you flip it over, you're going to see a little FR, and that's going to just mean that's the front of the vehicle. So the reason I tell you that is that it's going to be the relationship between this and these lines that will kind of show you where the positive and the negatives are. So if you look at it with the FR pointing up, the positive for each light is going to be this little hook piece here. I just marked a little X on them. And then the negative is the opposite contact for the light. So it's going to be the top trace here and this top trace as well. Now, the reason that's important is obviously it's a DC system, so it's going to work in one direction and not the other. And how I found that out is, well, it's a little embarrassing. I certainly don't recommend it, but what I did is I literally just took one of my lights and I took the contacts while the light was on and put them one way, kind of touched them, and it didn't work. Put it the other way and it did work. Obviously, I ran the risk of ruining this light. But it worked out, and it works just fine. So either way, I found out that this is the positive, this trace is the negative. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just take some solder, and I'm going to take some extra wire. All right, so this is just some speaker wire. It really doesn't matter. Kind of voltage is voltage, amperage is amperage. As long as you're not running a ton of power through these lines, you can use them. And it's kind of nice to know, they're very distinct colors. It's easy. So get something that's small. 18 gauge is probably the lowest you want to go. 16 would probably work. These lines have got to be at least 18. These are pretty small. So What we're going to do is solder the one that we want to be listed as the positive to the positive, the negative to the negative, and then that way we can just reassemble this. We can put it back up into the headlining and then just run these wires down to our lights. Now, to connect the other side, we're just going to kind of twist these together and use some waterproof heat shrink, just good old-fashioned heat shrink. Some alternatives to using solder. Well, you might have to get creative. You can maybe try to wrap your wire around this, tape it down. I even saw people online that actually wrapped the cables around the contacts of the light down underneath. Definitely not recommended, because if it gets loose, it could spark and stuff like that. So do something a little more secure. Maybe something like quick steel or any type of conductive adhesive would work as well. But I'm just going to solder these. So let's see if my gun is hot enough and we can get started. Okay, so I'm definitely not a soldering expert. To be honest, I'm barely even a novice. So this is definitely not going to be a lesson on how to solder, but I am going to attempt soldering just to make sure that the connections are solid, and especially when you're connecting to something like kind of like a flat trace, it's kind of difficult to get this stuff wrapped around and taped. So the way the Nissan electrical systems work, at least for the illumination, is that the switch for the power is actually on the negative side of the circuit. So the positive is actually constantly ran to the illumination. So in this case, this positive here is actually connected to the same positive by this trace. You may not be able to see it, but it's connected underneath. So what we're going to do is I took the two positives, since they're connected anyways, the two positives, and wrap them together. So I have both wires, just the positives, and the negatives is what we're going to separate on the other side of the fixture. So I'm going to wrap this around here. Okay. Basically, the reason I'm wrapping it is to get what they call like mechanical stability, meaning if you pull on it a little bit, it's going to put pressure not just on the solder that you're applying, but the wire itself. So I'm going to do this here. All right, so as you can see, it's wrapped around that trace now. Hopefully you can see that. And then I'm just going to apply some solder here to get these connections secured to this trace. And then once I do that, I'm just going to do the same on this trace here for the one side and this trace here for the other. Okay, so we're back. I finished the soldering. I have the two positives onto the positive trace and the separate negatives on each individual negative trace. So if this is the front, then this is going to be my driver's side, and this is going to be my passenger side. Now, what you just want to do is give these kind of a wiggle, see if they're nice and tight. All mine are nice and tight. Really what we're going to do now is just plug this back into the car, and we're going to test it. So that's going to be the first thing we want to do, is see if we can get them to light up the way we want them to. Because now's the time, right? Because if we're going to run all these wires through the car, we don't want to have to reverse any of the work that we do. So grab one of your strips, plug your battery back in, well, once you assemble this, and then give it a test. So let's go try that. So to test this out, we're just going to quickly plug it back into the Xterra and put the battery back together. So I connected my light strip here, so I'll just kind of set that up here or down here, wherever. And then I'm going to connect the wires. So the wires from the actual light strip, I plugged into one side of the dome lights. I also taped just the positive. The negative is okay. I mean, even if you touch it to something metal, that's the whole point, is that it's ground. So just quickly did that. But keep in mind, you also have a second side. So find the other side of your cable and make sure that they're not going to touch. So in this case, I just cut them off and separated them, so there's no real wire poking out, and I'm just going to set that aside. If you do have wire poking out, make sure you tape it up separately, or you know, cut them off so they're not gonna touch anything. You don't want these two things touching. So this is light enough that I can just kind of plug this in and let it hang. So I'm just gonna grab this, plug it back in. Okay, there we go. And then I'm gonna go plug the battery back in and see if we get this light strip to light up. So awesome. We have our dome light lit up, and so is our light strip. So I'm gonna take this off, just test the other one real quick, and then once they're both good to go, let's reassemble and get it all put back together. I'm actually going to demonstrate the actual running of the wires on the passenger side, and also the light installation. Really, it doesn't make a difference. It's pretty much the exact same process. So what you want to do is, this thing can get pretty twisted pretty easily. Just look on the back side, look for your front marker, line it up so that way you know that you're actually running the passenger wire to the passenger side and the driver to the driver's side. So I'm grabbed my here. This is the passenger side, so I'm going to run this one first. And really the way I'm going to do it is pretty classic. It's kind of like the jam and grab, so to speak. I'm going to grab some electrical tape, wrap it around the two wires that I'm running, the positive and the negative. Just kind of keeps them together since they were pulled out a little bit. And then I'm going to push it in here to the headliner, up towards the windshield, and then over and down. So put it in here first, and you just want to pull the headliner down a little bit until you can reach the cable. All right, so we have it there. Okay. Awesome. So pull all of the excess through first, because any excess we're going to deal with is going to be down below, and we're going to just cut it off. So pull everything through first. All right. There we go. And then now we're going to take this excess cable that we just pulled through, run it across the windshield, and then down the A-pillar down to the footwell. All right, so I have the headliner. Just gonna pull down and keep pushing the wire in. I'm just doing this with my fingers. If you need to do a tool, that's fine. Just get like a flathead screwdriver. Just be really careful around your windshield. You don't want to push too hard and crack it. So once you get over here to your A-pillar, you just want to basically do the same thing. Continue to push, get it in there. And you'll see that it's pretty simple with a wire this small to basically just kind of feed it with your finger. See how I'm able to do that? Push it in, and then it effectively just disappears. So keep doing that until you get over to the weather seal on your door, and then we're going to push it down the weather seal. So the weather seal is even easier. You can actually pull this away. So pull it away from the truck. Just be careful if it's old and kind of brittle that you don't want to rip it, of course. So once it's inside the weather strip, it fully disappears from this seam, so you can't even see it. Now basically you just want to continue to run it, and I'm going to run it on the inside, and I'm pushing the seal back on after my hand goes past that point, so it kind of holds it in place. So we'll keep going. All right. Okay, so we're just gonna keep pulling, pushing it back under. All right. Once you reach this point here, you can just kind of pop this back. This is just the kick panel, the interior kick panel. Pop this back, run the wire underneath, push it back in. So we'll line that up. There we go. Where's that go? There we go. All right, so now here's the excess wire. So we're already down in the footwell. So what we're gonna do is we are going to get our light strip, adhere it underneath near the glove box area, and then trim off our excess and connect the wires. All right, so we're under the passenger side near the glove box, and I'm actually going to mount my light right where the glove box joint is. And so it kind of moves with the glove box. So I went ahead and I actually trimmed mine. So you can actually cut these in certain places. There's a little section where it has the photo of a little pair of scissors cutting through. So you can cut them at any of those points. I cut mine to length so it would actually fit right where, right in that joint where the glove box opens. So I'm going to adhere that there. Once that's done, I'm going to connect the two cables, and then we can kind of wrap up the excess and put it under here somewhere. So let me grab this. Okay, so now we have it up. Now just connect the cables really any way you know how. So I'm going to shorten the length of this and then connect it using a shrink tube. Now, if you don't have shrink tube, just use regular electrical tape or little butt connectors you can use as well. I'm going to use shrink tape and a heat gun. If you don't have a heat gun, you can use your soldering iron to actually tighten this up with heat. The problem is every time I use my soldering iron, I burn right through this stuff. So I'm going to use this heat gun and connect all the wires. All right, so we have the wires connected with my heat shrink. I'm going to go ahead and wrap these in electrical tape anyways, only because I'm paranoid and I like to have a secure connection. So once these are done, I'm just going to wrap these up and get a little zip tie and put it underneath here. Okay? So once that's done, we just got to repeat that process on the passenger or on the driver's side. Okay, now that we've installed the lights and connected them up, I went ahead and put the dome lights back up into the headliner. And now when you click each headliner, or excuse me, each map light, the proper footwell turns on. And if you open the door, and if it's set the door, both of them turn on. Close the door, they turn off. And of course, if you turn both map lights on, they turn on. So mission accomplished. Okay, so a few quick notes about this job. First of all, it kind of looks harder than it really is. Running wires down the A-pillars or any pillar in the Nissan, if you haven't done it, it's actually really simple. It's an SUV, so it's got big chunky weather stripping, kind of big chunky pillars, not a lot of whole tight lines. So really, don't worry about it. If you're kind of concerned about running wires, it's really simple. You'll find that it's something that you're not going to be worried about doing in the future. Secondly, soldering, really the same thing. If you need your soldering to look good, it takes a ton of practice. If you need your soldering to be functional and just work, you can really do it on the first time. So just read directions for the solder that you buy, and if you have an iron, both of those things are dirt cheap. Give them a try. It's pretty simple. If you have any questions about it, certainly send them over to me and I'll try to answer them. Lastly, when you're working with any electrical, I always need to say, make sure you disconnect your negative battery cable, and you just really don't want to run any risks of shocking yourself or damaging your Nissan. So as always, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you find this useful. If you have any comments, questions, or recommendations, make sure you put them in the comments below. Thanks. Bye.